the Bible, when you read it, the Paul is calling homosexuality a sin, and the reason he is calling it a sin is because it's not natural. I heard Chuck Colson say once, it is very easy to find out what is natural when it comes to sex, and that is put a naked man and a naked woman together, and you can find out pretty quickly what is natural. And Paul is simply saying it's not natural to be homosexual. God did not make us that way. Something to be noted, though, is that this is not necessarily verse 24. Paul isn't necessarily repeating himself. It says that they defiled themselves among themselves. They defiled their bodies among themselves, which is a whole different kind of sexual perversion, so to speak, kind of sex outside of marriage, or just not taking what God has held sacred as sacred and just doing whatever you want with it. It's Paul is kind of separating the issue. It almost seems as if Paul is saying that it goes from one sexual perversion to another sexual perversion. I think we can see a kind of a progression of the society that Paul talks about. I do want to say this about homosexuality. There's no reason for us to be afraid of homosexuals. If homosexuality is sin, then it's a sin like all other sins. But I think we need to understand that homosexuality, if it is a sin like Paul says it is, then Paul, he is not condemning anybody. Again, he does not condemn people. Paul, if Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ, then John chapter 3, verse 17 applies to even homosexuals. He did not come into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world. If the world acts like homosexuals, that's the way that the world acts. Without Christ, we are perpetually sinful people, and we are doomed to do all kinds of sins. There is not one sin that we are incapable of not doing. We can do anything. It does not matter. And whenever someone says that God hates homosexuals, that doesn't make any sense at all. There's no sense applied to that statement. Absolutely none. When you see Jesus and he's standing there, and the Pharisees catch this woman in adultery, they throw this lady at the feet of Jesus, and they tell Jesus, what are we going to do with this lady who was caught in adultery? And according to their law, they were supposed to stone her. Well, Jesus asked the Pharisees, he who is without sin, you cast the first stone. They all walk away. All of them do. What Jesus asked the lady, he says, where are your accusers? She says, well, they all left. Well, Jesus says, well, neither do I accuse you. Go and sin no more. That is a very important thing to note, is the fact that adultery is mentioned more than homosexuality is, hands down. Absolutely, hands down. There's whole chapters devoted to it in Proverbs. It's all the way through the Bible mentioned as a sin. And it is decidedly more sinful if you apply it to how many times it's mentioned. It is definitely decidedly more sinful than homosexuality is. And with that amount of mentioned adultery in the Bible, Jesus still tells the lady that he says, I do not accuse you. Go and sin no more. Why can't we apply that to homosexuals? It makes no sense why we can't do that. God does not hate homosexuals. It does not make sense to even say that. It does not make sense to hate them. It certainly doesn't make sense to treat them like they're nobodies or like they're outcasts. Honestly, Christians should be the first people that they should go to when they want to say that they're homosexuals. They shouldn't have had to be in the closet for however many years they've been in the closet. And the point that I'm trying to make is this, that we are sinful people. Lying is a sin. Homosexuality is a sin. There's no sense that there's no reason why we can't treat homosexuals like we treat liars. There's no reason why we can't treat homosexuals like normal people. And there's no reason why we should say, if God does not hate liars, then God certainly does not hate homosexuals.